I turned and nearly collided with him in the narrow hallway outside the guest room. The dim light from the fireplace flickered down the hall, making his silhouette hard to distinguish. But the scent, that unmistakable blend of aged oak and old spice, wrapped around me like a memory. My heart thudded once, then again, faster. We stood still. Too still. The space between us was shrinking, not physically, but in a way I couldn't control. His breath wasn't shaky. Mine was. His eyes never left mine. I didn't move. Not because I didn't want to, but because I wasn't sure if I was awake or sleepwalking through something irreversible. Our faces were so close, one word could have changed everything. I opened my mouth, but nothing came out. He leaned in, just slightly, and the moment pulsed like it was alive. Then, footsteps. Heavy ones. From behind. Everything shattered back into reality like broken glass. Before I begin the story and tell you how everything really happened, answer this question: would you be able to forgive a loved one's betrayal? Thanksgiving in Vermont was supposed to be peaceful. A lake house wrapped in pine trees. Cold wind on the windows. A quiet retreat from the life I'd spent years trying to convince myself was fulfilling. We arrived late in the afternoon. My husband was grumbling about how the heater in the truck clicked on late and how the cranberry sauce always tasted better when made at home instead of bought at Whole Foods. I nodded along, boots crunching in the icy gravel, eyes scanning the porch light that flickered like it had a pulse. The lake glimmered faintly in the distance. I hadn't seen it in years. He fumbled with the keys. I watched his hands, aged, steady, familiar. Then I saw another figure inside, back turned, setting down bags. The son. He greeted me with a nod. No hug. Just a nod. Not rude. Not warm. Just neutral. The house smelled like cinnamon candles and fresh logs. The heat inside hadn't kicked in fully, so it still carried that winter bite. The three of us settled in. I unpacked in silence. The living room looked exactly as it had in old photos, family portraits with everyone but me. Later that night, the two of them fell into rhythm like they always had. Watching football. Teasing each other about whose team was worse. I sat on the armrest of the couch, sipping red wine, laughing when prompted. Smiling when noticed. Invisible in the gaps. I excused myself, wandered into the kitchen. The dishwasher was running. Someone had been here earlier. He entered a moment later. The son. Quiet. He went for the fridge, grabbed a soda, then turned. You okay? He asked. I blinked. Yeah. Just adjusting. He looked at me for a moment. Too long. I smiled. He didn't. The conversation ended before it began. The next day we went into town. A small New England general store with wooden floors and bells above the door. I picked pumpkin pie. He picked apple. My husband rolled his eyes and said to grab both. We laughed. It felt normal. Safer in public. The weather dropped fast. By sunset, frost clung to the porch railing like spiderwebs. The three of us ate turkey, mashed potatoes, green bean casserole. I drank a second glass of wine. The sun barely touched his food. When my husband fell asleep during a rerun of Planes, Trains and Automobiles, I stayed behind in the den. The fire had burned down to a soft glow. I didn't want to go to bed. Not yet. He appeared again. This time leaning on the doorframe, arms crossed. No soda in hand. Just watching. You're not tired? I asked, voice low. He shook his head. The silence pressed between us like fog. Thick, quiet, unsettling. Then he said it. You looked peaceful last night. I flinched slightly. What do you mean? His reply was soft. Too soft. You sleep deeply. He disappeared before I could say anything. I sat there another 15 minutes before heading upstairs. My husband's bedroom door was cracked. Inside, I saw him sound asleep, snoring lightly. I slipped into our bed. Cold sheets. Lights off. I tried to breathe steady. Some time later, I felt the mattress shift. Familiar scent. Familiar breath. I didn't turn around. In the morning, sunlight poured in like a cruel trick. I stretched out my hand, but I was alone in the bed. I called out softly. No answer. Downstairs, I found my husband in the kitchen, flipping pancakes like it was just another holiday morning. You came to bed so late last night, I said. He looked at me, confused. No, I passed out in the guest room after the third quarter. Didn't want to wake you. Thought you needed rest. He smiled. The scent of Old Spice hit me like a punch. And standing behind him, sipping orange juice, was the son, wearing a hoodie I'd never seen before. One that smelled exactly like the man I thought I'd slept beside. But hadn't. The smell of pancakes should have been comforting. It should have brought a sense of normalcy, the kind that anchors you after a strange dream. But there was nothing comforting about the morning sun that filtered through the kitchen windows or the way he turned around, grinning, holding a spatula in one hand and waving the syrup bottle like we were in some kind of Folgers commercial. My husband. And behind him, sitting at the table with orange juice and silent eyes, was the one I couldn't look at. I kept my face still. Controlled. A smile painted on like it belonged there. My heart thudded so hard I was afraid they'd hear it, but I pulled out a chair and sat down like nothing inside me was breaking. Like I hadn't just realized I'd let a stranger touch me without ever laying a hand on me. The scent hit again, stronger now. That same Old Spice I'd bought my husband last Christmas, now clinging to a sweatshirt that didn't belong to him. I chewed on a forkful of pancakes I couldn't taste, nodded when asked about sleep, even managed to laugh once when my husband brought up his annual tradition of burning the turkey. But I barely heard any of it. The son never said a word. Not to me. Not to anyone. He simply ate, slow and steady, like he had all the time in the world. But when I stood to grab more coffee, his eyes followed me. No expression. Just quiet, burning stillness. By noon, I told them I needed a walk to clear my head. My husband didn't argue. The son disappeared upstairs. I took the trail behind the house, past the frozen dock and toward the wooded curve where the trees closed in like hands. I kept walking. Miles, maybe. It was cold enough to bite through the jacket, but I welcomed it. Anything was better than the heat that had sunk into my chest. I stopped eventually, sat on a wooden bench by the overlook. The lake was still, mirror-like. And my reflection looked like a woman I didn't recognize. I didn't know what to call what had happened. Betrayal? Mistake? Was it still a betrayal if I thought it was someone else? Was it a mistake if I hadn't said no? I didn't have answers. Only questions, and they echoed louder with every gust of wind. When I got back to the house, the door was open. I stepped inside to the sound of laughter. The two of them were watching a college football game, side by side on the couch. The warmth of the house hit me like a wall. He turned to me, my husband, asked if I was feeling better. I nodded. Much. Later that day, I found myself alone in the laundry room. A basket of towels in my arms, I reached to open the dryer and froze. Sitting there, neatly folded on top, was the hoodie. The same one that smelled like last night. I held it to my face. The cologne wasn't faint. It was fresh. Like it had been sprayed that morning. My knees buckled slightly, but I caught myself against the dryer. I didn't know what I was doing when I brought it to our bedroom and buried it beneath our clean bedsheets. I just needed it gone. Out of sight. Out of reach. That night, dinner was leftover turkey sandwiches and chips. My husband went to bed early. He kissed my cheek and said something about needing energy for tomorrow's hike. I stayed behind to clean up. Alone in the kitchen, wiping down counters that didn't need it. He appeared again. Quiet. The sun. I didn't turn around. But I knew he was standing behind me. Watching. I spoke first, low and measured. "What do you think you're doing?" He didn't answer. Just stepped closer. I could feel the warmth of his presence even if we didn't touch. "You knew I'd think it was him," I said, voice barely above a whisper. Silence. Then, soft and deliberate, I didn't say a word. The air between us was sharp, electric. My hands trembled, so I gripped the edge of the counter. "You used his cologne," I said. A pause. "You noticed." I turned then. Slowly. Meeting his eyes, unflinching. "Why?" He didn't smile. Didn't blink. "Because you wouldn't have let me in otherwise." It should have made me furious. It should have made me scream. But it didn't. Because the worst part was that he wasn't wrong. He stepped forward, and for one impossible second, the air between us shrank again. My breath caught. We kissed. The moment shattered instantly by the sound of a door creaking above. I jerked back, pulse hammering. Footsteps on the stairs. He was gone before I could speak. Disappeared into the hallway like smoke. My husband wandered into the kitchen rubbing his eyes, asking if we had any ginger ale. I nodded, opened the fridge, handed him a can. Smiled. Said I couldn't sleep either. He kissed my forehead and shuffled back upstairs. I stood there in the kitchen, my whole body still burning. But the twist didn't come until morning. While folding sheets, my husband found the hoodie. He laughed when he held it up. "You still wear this thing?" he asked. I froze. He looked at it again. "Wait, this isn't mine." And before I could speak, he lifted it to his nose, sniffed it, and frowned. "I haven't worn Old Spice in years." I didn't answer right away. My husband stood in front of me, holding the hoodie like some innocent relic, completely unaware of what it meant. His expression was puzzled, not suspicious. I nodded, forced a casual shrug, and mumbled something about probably grabbing it by mistake from the guest laundry pile. He accepted the explanation without a second glance and tossed it aside. I folded the rest of the sheets mechanically. My thoughts, however, were in chaos. He hadn't worn Old Spice in years. But someone had. Someone who knew I would notice it in the dark. The house felt colder after that. Not in temperature, the fire still crackled in the stone hearth, but in atmosphere. Every room, every hallway, every glance carried a new weight. I moved through it like someone avoiding landmines. After lunch, my husband suggested a hike through the woods behind the lake. I nodded quickly, volunteering to clean up so they could go ahead. He didn't argue. He kissed my cheek and disappeared upstairs to grab his coat. Minutes later, the front door slammed shut. I watched from the kitchen window as they both disappeared into the trees. Finally alone, I exhaled fully for the first time that day. I moved quickly. The hoodie was still where he'd tossed it, draped over the back of the couch. I grabbed it, shoved it into a bag with a few fire-stained logs, and slipped out to the backyard. There was a small metal barrel by the shed, the one they used to burn yard waste. I dropped the bundle inside, struck a match, and watched the flames catch. I stood there until it was nothing but ash. No more scent. No more evidence. The wind stung my face as I walked back in. My fingers shook, not from the cold, but from the sheer adrenaline of doing something that couldn't be undone. But there was relief too. Small, quick, sharp relief. They returned an hour later, boots muddy and cheeks pink from the cold. I offered hot cocoa. I made jokes about the temperature dropping. I listened while my husband told some story about slipping on a frozen route. I smiled through all of it. But the sun said nothing. Not one word. Later that night, we all played cards in the living room. The fire cracked, the TV was muted in the background, and the deck passed between us like ritual. My husband was relaxed, focused on the game. But I could feel the sun's eyes on me. Not openly, just occasional glances when my hands reached for the cards, when I leaned back in my chair. And then he said it. "You always pick hearts." It was said so casually, like an observation. But it cut through the room like a siren. My hand froze mid-reach. My husband looked up, chuckling. "She's always been romantic," he said. I forced a smile. "Guess I'm predictable." The game ended. My husband said he was heading to bed. I told him I'd join him soon. He yawned, kissed the top of my head, and climbed the stairs. I stayed behind to clean up the cards. He lingered too. The silence was loud. He stepped toward me, not close, not invading, just present. I didn't turn around this time. He didn't say anything either. We kissed. It lasted a second. Maybe less. But it didn't need to be more. The moment itself was a scream I couldn't silence. I stepped back, my voice barely audible. "Don't." He didn't move. His eyes held mine, but he stayed silent. I turned, walked to the stairs, and didn't look back. The next morning, we drove into town. My husband wanted to pick up more wood for the fireplace. He insisted on taking the truck. The son volunteered to ride with him. I stayed behind. Said I'd prep lunch. Said I needed space to breathe. Once they left, I walked to the garage. I didn't even know what I was looking for. Maybe proof. Maybe denial. But I found neither. What I did find was a crumpled brown bag stuffed behind the toolbox on the workbench. Inside it, a small black bottle of Old Spice cologne. Brand new. Cap off. Half used. I stared at it like it was a confession. But it wasn't the bottle that shattered me. It was the note beneath it, a scrap of lined paper, torn on the edge. Folded once, tucked carefully under the bottle. I opened it with shaking hands. Just 5 words, scribbled in uneven handwriting. "You already knew it wasn't." My legs nearly gave out. I sat on the floor, the paper crumpled in my fist, the scent of the cologne thick in the air. He had never tried to lie. I had lied to myself. I sat on the cold garage floor, the note still clenched in my hand. The silence around me was absolute, thick, pressing, like insulation wrapped around my thoughts. I wasn't trembling from fear. It was something else. The kind of stillness that comes when the truth is no longer abstract. When it has weight. Texture. Smell. I put the bottle back exactly where I found it. Folded the note again. Placed it beneath. I didn't know why I did that. Maybe I needed to preserve the evidence, as if it might one day accuse me properly. Or maybe I wasn't ready to destroy anything else. When the truck pulled back into the driveway, I was already at the sink washing carrots. My hands moved automatically. The blade chopped smoothly. My heart didn't. They came in talking about road conditions, about the local guy who loaded the wood into the bed of the truck, about how everything costs more in winter. My husband kissed the back of my head and said something about how the roads might freeze later. I smiled at nothing. We ate lunch at the kitchen island. Chicken salad sandwiches. Leftover chips. I pretended to care about how good the wood smelled when it burned. The son sat across from me, chewing slowly, eyes unreadable. But I could feel it between us, something irreversible had passed. And he wasn't backing away from it. After we finished, my husband suggested we go into town for dessert. He knew a coffee shop by the highway that still made fresh pecan pie. I agreed too fast, which made him smile. He offered to warm up the truck. I told him I'd grab my coat. The son and I ended up in the hallway at the same time. We both reached for the closet door. Our hands brushed. I pulled back immediately, grabbed a scarf, and turned away. Then his voice behind me, low and deliberate. "You put it back." I froze for half a second, then kept moving. "I don't know what you mean." "You do." The front door opened, and we both dropped the conversation into silence like it never existed. The drive was short, filled with music and low chatter from my husband. He pointed out Christmas lights. Told a story about a snowball fight he had as a kid. I nodded in the right places. The coffee shop was a restored old house, decked in red bows and fake snow. Inside, it smelled like cinnamon, espresso, and butter. A waitress with short silver hair recognized my husband and hugged him. He introduced me proudly. I smiled through it. She offered us the best table by the window. The three of us sat, steaming mugs of coffee in front of us, pie plates warm to the touch. My husband got up to greet an old friend who'd just walked in. And for one stretch of seconds, we were alone. "You found it," he said again, not even pretending this time. I didn't look at him. "Why did you write that?" "Because it's true." I stared at the snow falling beyond the window, as if it could drown out everything in the room. "I thought I was losing my mind," I whispered. "You weren't. What do you want from me?" He didn't answer right away. Just took a sip of coffee and placed the cup down slowly. "I didn't come here with a plan," he said. I looked at him. Finally. His face was calm. "Certain. But you had a bottle of cologne." His eyes met mine. "I came with the truth. The rest happened." My husband returned just as my hand lifted to wipe my eye. I lied, said something had irritated it. He didn't notice. On the drive back, the air was filled with holiday music. My husband hummed along. I stared straight ahead. When we got back to the lake house, he went upstairs for a nap. The son said he'd split some logs outside. I stayed in the kitchen, pacing in circles I didn't realize I was making. By the time the sun dropped behind the trees, I'd made soup. A habit. Something productive to fill the time. That evening, we sat in the den again. Fire glowing. TV low. My husband dozing in his chair. I got up and walked outside for air. The porch creaked beneath my feet. The lake shimmered in the dark like it was breathing. He came out moments later. No jacket. Just his presence. We didn't speak. We just stood there, side by side, watching our reflections in the glass door. We kissed. I stepped away first. "I can't do this," I said. "I didn't ask you to." We went back inside separately. The house was warm. Too warm. I pulled my scarf tighter anyway. And then, just before midnight, my husband came into the bedroom carrying a small box. "I almost forgot," he said. Found this earlier. Thought it might be yours. He handed me the note. The same note. Still folded. Still intact. But there was no bottle of cologne. No handwriting. No words. It was blank. The note was blank. I turned it over in my hand, front and back, twice. The creases were exactly where they'd been when I first unfolded it in the garage. The texture, the faint oil from my fingers, even the corner that had been bent when I pulled it from beneath the bottle, all the same. Except now, it said nothing. My husband was already crawling into bed, blissfully unaware, his voice drifting behind me as I stood frozen near the door. Figured it was something you left in your jacket. I found it wedged behind the bench in the garage. Thought you might want it. I nodded. My throat was too dry to speak. I slid the paper into the drawer beside the bed and climbed in next to him. The lights went out. The room filled with the quiet ticking of the old wall clock. A pine log shifted in the fireplace downstairs, crackling softly like distant thunder. But sleep didn't come. By morning, I had convinced myself that exhaustion was playing tricks. Maybe there was no message. Maybe I wanted there to be one. Breakfast was quiet. My husband scrolled on his tablet at the table. I poured coffee, barely tasting it. The son walked in just as I reached for the sugar. Our eyes met. No greeting. No acknowledgement. He grabbed a banana from the counter and turned away. But I saw it. The smirk. Not a smile. Not even smugness. Just a flicker, like he knew what had happened. Like he'd planned it. Or maybe he hadn't planned anything at all, maybe that was worse. Later, my husband suggested we take a short trip into the nearby town. He wanted to show me a bookstore he loved, and then take a drive along the lake before the snow got worse. I said yes, but only if we could stop at the antique market afterward. I needed the space. I needed something to look at that wasn't his face, or the sun's. We left just after noon. The air was brittle and cold. My husband put on an old Johnny Mathis Christmas CD, singing along like he always did. I smiled when he looked at me. Pretended everything was fine. But I couldn't stop thinking about the paper. The disappearing message. The cologne. The silence. The look. Everything was unraveling, slow, quiet, polite. No confrontations. No raised voices. Just truths, laying themselves bare in ways I didn't know how to handle. The bookstore was quaint, with uneven wooden floors and warm yellow lights strung across the ceiling. I walked the aisles alone while he chatted with the clerk near the front. I didn't read the titles. I didn't need to. I was only looking for one thing. A moment. One quiet moment to breathe. I didn't get it. Because he was there. The sun. In the back of the store. Near the travel section. I blinked twice, certain I was imagining him. He hadn't come with us. I was sure of it. But there he stood with black jacket, hands in his pockets, eyes already watching me. He didn't move. Didn't speak. Just stared. I turned and walked back toward the front. My husband was flipping through a book on cabin renovations. I think I left my gloves in the truck, I said. He tossed me the keys without looking up. Take your time. I stepped outside, but didn't go to the truck. I walked straight around the side of the building and waited in the alley. He followed me 30 seconds later. I didn't write anything, he said. You saw what you needed to see. I said nothing. He stepped closer, voice lower now. That means it's not about me anymore. I turned away, heart hammering. You're making it worse, I said. He smiled, not wide, not cruel, just knowing. No. I'm just not lying. I backed up a step. Go home. Leave us alone. I live here. You know what I mean. He leaned against the wall, crossed his arms. You kissed me. I didn't answer. He looked up at the sky. There's a storm coming tonight. Power's gonna go. Place'll go dark. I stared at him. Why are you telling me that? He shrugged. Sometimes truth is just information. Before I could say another word, he walked away. Around the corner. Gone. I stood in that alley for a long time, staring at melting snow pooling along the bricks. We drove home as the clouds thickened overhead. My husband held my hand the whole way. We listened to Nat King Cole this time. By nightfall, the wind was moaning through the trees. Just after dinner, the lights flickered once, then twice. Then darkness. No storm warning. No alert. Just pitch-black silence. My husband grabbed a flashlight from the drawer, told me to stay warm by the fireplace. He said he'd check the breaker box out back. I nodded, pulling a blanket around my shoulders, watching the flames dance in the hearth. I waited 5 minutes. Then 10. And when the back door opened again, I didn't turn around. I only heard the footsteps. Slow. Deliberate. He sat beside me. Silent. I said nothing. We watched the fire. We spent night together. The next morning, the power was back. The fire was out. And I woke up alone. But there was something new on the kitchen counter. A set of keys. Not to the house. Not to the truck. To a place I'd never seen. Attached to them, a motel tag. And a note. Room 212. Check out noon. Do not return. I stared at the keys for what felt like an hour. Room 212. Do not return. The handwriting was clean, steady. There was no emotion in the letters, no curve or emphasis. It was simply information, just like he said. I tucked them into my coat pocket without thinking. My hands were still shaking when I poured coffee. My husband came in minutes later, hair tousled, yawning, rubbing the sleep out of his eyes like nothing had changed. He wrapped an arm around me, kissed the top of my head, and asked if I wanted to go ice skating in town. I said yes. I always said yes. The day moved like it had been rehearsed. We skated for 30 minutes. I smiled when he took my hand. We walked through the town square, stopped for hot cider, talked about winter vacations. I barely heard a word. All I could see was the white plastic tag in my coat pocket pressing against my thigh with every step. On the way home, he suggested we take a different route. I told him I wasn't feeling well. I lied. I always lied. He nodded, concern passing over his face, but not suspicion. He offered to make soup and I told him that would be nice. When we got back, I headed upstairs, claiming I needed to lie down. I heard him in the kitchen, moving slowly, whistling a tune I didn't recognize. I waited until I heard the sink running and the pantry door creak open. Then I slipped downstairs, grabbed the car keys, and stepped outside. The cold hit immediately, sharp and loud. I didn't turn back. I drove with the windows fogging slowly from the inside. I didn't turn on music. I didn't check directions. I just followed instinct, the kind you pretend you don't have until it drags you by the throat. The motel was 15 minutes away. A beige, low-slung building off a back road that looped behind the frozen marina. The neon vacancy sign buzzed weakly, barely visible in the snow-heavy sky. Room 212 was at the far end. No lights in the window. The door looked untouched. I parked. Waited. No movement. I stepped out, boots crunching softly. The air smelled like pine and dust. I approached the door with hesitant steps, unsure what I would do once I stood in front of it. I unlocked it. The room was empty. One bed, made. A table and 2 chairs. A small TV. A half-empty water bottle on the nightstand. Nothing else. But on the bed, centered perfectly against the pillow, was a folded piece of paper. I sat down before opening it. You had a choice. Now I do. There was no signature. No explanation. Just silence. I waited in that room. Minutes. Maybe an hour. I watched the snow slide down the window, melt, and disappear. I listened for footsteps, voices, a car door, but nothing came. When I finally stood to leave, I noticed a second envelope tucked inside the nightstand drawer. No name on it. Inside, a photo of me. Asleep. My face turned toward the camera, partially covered by a blanket. It was dark, blurry, taken from the side. There was nothing inappropriate. No exposed skin. No obvious location. Just my face. But I recognized the blanket. It was from the lake house. I didn't remember the picture being taken. I stuffed it into my bag and walked back to the car in a haze, the key still in my coat pocket, my breath short and shallow. I couldn't feel my fingers. By the time I returned to the house, it was dusk. The lights were on. My husband was chopping carrots in the kitchen, smiling like he always did when he cooked something from scratch. You look better, he said, turning toward me. That nap must have helped. I nodded, dropped my coat on the back of a chair, and walked to the sink to wash my hands. The photo burned a hole in my bag. Dinner passed quietly. I couldn't stop watching him, studying his face for any flicker of knowledge, any sign that he'd seen something or suspected anything. But there was nothing. He hummed to himself while setting the table. He poured us wine and told me about an article he'd read on geothermal heating. The son didn't join us. Said he was going to stay in his room and rest. After dinner, I cleaned the dishes while my husband stoked the fire. The shadows of the flames danced along the living room walls, alive and flickering. He was talking about skiing tomorrow, maybe even a short road trip north if the weather held. I agreed to everything without hearing a word. Then he stood, stretched, and smiled like he had every night for years. I'm going to bed early. You staying up? I nodded. Just for a bit. He kissed my forehead and climbed the stairs. I waited until I heard the bedroom door close. Then I opened my bag. I stared at the photo again. I turned it over. There was writing on the back. You smiled in your sleep. The pen pressure was light. Deliberate. I burned the photo in the fireplace. I sat in front of the flames, watching the edges curl and blacken until there was nothing left but ash and the faint scent of ink. And that's when I heard it. The sound of boots on the porch. But when I opened the door, there was no one there. Only a small cardboard box. And inside it, the same bottle of cologne. Completely full. Unopened. Still sealed in plastic. Price tag attached. Dated yesterday. Purchased by my husband's credit card. I held the sealed box like it might burn through my palms. The packaging was clean, untouched. The receipt was tucked neatly inside. No message, no ambiguity. It had been purchased yesterday. Paid for with my husband's card. But I knew he hadn't left the house all day. Not once. We were together nearly the whole time. And yet, there it was. I took the box into the garage and set it on the workbench next to the empty firewood crate. My fingers hovered above the tape, but I didn't open it. I didn't need to. I'd already memorized every angle of that bottle, the same one I'd smelled in my sheets. The same one I'd burned. Snow began falling again as I stood there, in silence, the cold bleeding through the concrete floor. The wind howled once across the eaves. I shut the light off and walked back inside. Upstairs, my husband was asleep. I could hear his breath, slow and even, behind the bedroom door. I didn't go to bed. I curled up in the living room chair under a blanket and stared at the fire until it dimmed to embers. I wasn't searching for answers anymore. I was waiting, for what, I didn't know. Maybe for something to slip. Maybe for everything to collapse. At some point, I must have dozed off. When I opened my eyes again, the light outside had turned blue with dawn. The house was still. I sat up. The blanket slid off my shoulders. There, on the coffee table, was a folded napkin. Just a diner napkin, creased, soft, marked with ink. One word, why? The handwriting was different this time. Thicker. Rushed. But unmistakable. It hadn't been there when I closed my eyes. I stood quickly, walked to the front door. It was locked. I checked the back. Same. I ran upstairs, heartbeat pounding in my ears. My husband was gone. The bed was made. His suitcase was gone from the closet. I stared at the empty spot where it had rested for the last week. Slowly, I backed away from the door and walked to the kitchen. On the table sat a single envelope with my name on it. No return address. No handwriting on the front. Inside, another receipt. A motel room, same as before. Room 212. Only this one had a checkout time printed for the previous morning. I looked again. The payment wasn't from my husband's card. It was from mine. Authorized 2 days ago. The name matched. The signature, mine. I didn't remember signing anything. But the card had been in my wallet the whole time. I opened the fridge on instinct. His leftovers were gone. So were the apples he liked sliced in the mornings. Even the jar of honey he brought from home, gone. No note. No message. Just missing. I walked through the house like it had become someone else's. The silence was unbearable now. Not peaceful. Not still. Just hollow. I checked his nightstand. Empty. The drawer where he kept his books, cleared. The charger was missing from the outlet. The scent of him had vanished. I went back downstairs and stood in the center of the living room. Every trace of him was gone, except the napkin on the table and the unopened box still sitting in the garage. I sat down again. Slowly. Carefully. As if my body might fall apart. That was when I noticed it, one more thing. The fireplace poker had been moved. Not by much. Just a few inches to the right. But enough to notice. Beneath it, tucked behind the stone ledge, another folded piece of paper. Different paper this time, ripped from the motel notepad. You knew from the first night. No name. No date. But I read it 5 times. He hadn't just left. He'd rewritten everything. And now, the only question I couldn't escape. Which one of them had really been pretending? The house felt unfamiliar now. Each room, though untouched, echoed differently, emptier, wider, wrong. I walked through it again, slowly, as if retracing the shape of something I used to know. The kitchen still smelled faintly of coffee. The bedroom was perfectly made. The coat rack by the door held only my jacket. The silence wasn't new, but now it meant something. The napkin still sat on the table. Why? The note behind the fireplace still whispered, "You knew from the first night." I didn't throw either away. By noon, the snow had stopped falling. The wind outside was calmer. I sat on the edge of the guest bed, his bed, and stared at the floorboards. They creaked differently beneath my feet, as if trying to speak. The scent that once haunted this room had faded. Or maybe I'd stopped recognizing it. I opened the drawer beside the bed. Empty. No books. No charger. Just dust and a crumpled gas station receipt. Not recent, dated a week before we arrived. One line, 2 bottles of water, beef jerky, cologne. I stared at it long enough for the ink to blur. Something shifted in me. I pulled out my suitcase and began packing. Not out of decision, just necessity. Motion felt safer than stillness. Downstairs, I gathered my toiletries. My hand froze over the bathroom counter when I saw it. A razor. Not mine. Not my husband's. Still damp. Fresh. He had been here after I fell asleep. After I'd thought he was gone. My heart thudded once, deep and low. I turned slowly and looked behind me. The mirror reflected nothing but a tired woman in someone else's story. I zipped my bag and brought it to the front door. The snowplow had cleared the road. My car was covered but accessible. The lake beyond the hill was frozen solid, the ice dull and flat like a sheet of poured concrete. I walked to the garage to get the scraper. The box with the cologne was gone. Only the faint ring of its outline remained on the wood. I closed the garage and stepped toward the car, brushing snow from the windshield. A bird startled from the trees overhead, scattering snow in its flight. I paused. When I turned back toward the house, I saw him standing on the porch. No coat. Just jeans, boots, and the same sweatshirt I'd hidden under our sheets days ago. The one I'd burned. Or thought I had. His hands were in his pockets. His posture wasn't confident, but it wasn't hesitant either. Just still. Like he was letting me decide who I was looking at. I didn't speak. Neither did he. I walked up the steps slowly. Closer, I saw his face more clearly. There was no smugness. No apology. Only clarity. And something else, tiredness. Maybe we shared that now. He stepped aside without a word, letting me pass him into the house. Inside, nothing had changed. Fire still dead. Air still cold. No new notes. No suitcase. No explanations. He followed me into the living room. I turned toward him. "I thought you were gone," I said. He shook his head once. "No. Just done pretending." I stared at him. "So that night?" He didn't blink. "You knew." "I didn't." "You didn't stop it." I sat on the edge of the couch, tension crawling under my skin. He stayed standing, watching me with the same calm he'd carried since the beginning. "What do you want?" I asked. His eyes didn't move. "Nothing." "Then why come back?" "Because he left." I stared. "What?" He stepped forward. "Your husband. He's not coming back. Not to this house." I waited for more, but he didn't elaborate. "You spoke to him?" He nodded. We didn't need to say much. My pulse quickened. "What did you tell him?" "Nothing he didn't already feel." I stood. "Stop speaking in riddles." He finally blinked. Then looked away. He saw the signs. Long before this. My breath caught. He knew? He knew something. He didn't know what. But he didn't want to find out. I wrapped my arms around myself. So he left. He nodded once. And you stayed. I didn't have a reason to leave. The room felt smaller suddenly. The ceiling lower. My vision narrowed to the lines in the hardwood between us. I walked past him, back to the front door. The cold greeted me again, sharp and metallic. He didn't follow. I opened the trunk of my car and placed my suitcase inside. When I turned back to the house, he was gone. The door swung slightly in the wind, but no one stood in it. I climbed into the driver's seat, heart pounding. The dashboard flickered to life. And sitting on the passenger seat was a set of keys. Not mine. His. With a motel tag. Room 213. Not 212. Taped to the keys, a note in the same handwriting as before. You looked peaceful again last night. But this time, you smiled with your eyes open. My hands gripped the wheel. And for the first time, I realized. I had never known who left the first night. Or who stayed. I didn't touch the keys. I stared at them, the tag flipped over by a gust from the heater, revealing a motel name I'd never seen before. The number was unmistakable. Not 212, 213. Close enough to matter. Different enough to destroy something. I reached for them slowly, as if they might vanish the moment I acknowledged them. My fingers closed around the cold ring. The metal bit into my palm. The note was taped tight, folded once, that same stiff paper from the other nights. I didn't read it again. I didn't need to. I had memorized the words already. You looked peaceful again last night. But this time, you smiled with your eyes open. I opened the car door and climbed out, boots pressing into the snow. The wind had picked up again, brushing against my neck like a whisper. I stood there, car idling, staring at the front door of the house. But no one opened it. No movement. No shadow in the window. I could have driven away. I could have left the house and the lake and every confusing thread behind. But instead, I walked back inside. It was warm. Too warm. The fireplace crackled like it hadn't been touched in hours, yet the heat was fresh, the logs recently turned. My coat was still on the hook. My scarf hadn't moved. The silence returned, but it felt charged now, like a room waiting for someone to speak. I called out once. No answer. I walked through every room. Living room, empty. Kitchen, clean. Bedroom, undisturbed. Guest room, bed still made. No signs of him. Not the son. Not the husband. Not anyone. And yet the house didn't feel empty. It felt paused. Like a film frozen just before the next scene. I made tea to give myself a task. Holding something warm helped. I sat at the kitchen island, the steam fogging my vision, and replayed everything. The notes. The scent. The timing. The cold mornings. The small details that had built and broken me. I opened my laptop, trying to anchor myself. I didn't check emails. I didn't need to. I went straight to my credit card account. Logged in. Waited for the page to load. The transaction for the motel room, room 212, was still there. But now, right beneath it, another charge had posted. From the same motel. Room 213. Time-stamped, last night, 2:14 a.m. Authorized. Same card. Same signature. Mine. I froze. I had been home. I had not left. I hadn't taken the car anywhere. And yet. The keys. The note. The words. The handwriting. A door creaked upstairs. My breath caught in my throat. I moved slowly toward the stairs, each step deliberate. The hallway was dim. The guest room door was open just a sliver. I pushed it wider. The bed was made. On the pillow, my phone. I hadn't realized it was missing. But there it was. Placed neatly, screen turned down. I picked it up. Checked the battery. Dead. I plugged it in and waited, standing in the doorway like I might need to run. When the screen finally lit up, one notification blinked, camera roll updated, 3 new items. I opened the gallery. 3 photos. All of me. Sleeping. Again. Taken last night. The room visible in the frame. But it wasn't the lakehouse bedroom. It was the motel. Room 213. In the reflection behind me, a figure stood. Just at the edge of the mirror. Blurry. No face. Just a shadow. I scrolled to the last image. It was taken from inside a car. My car. The angle looked up at the house, early morning light behind it. In the foreground, my silhouette in the window, holding something in my hand. Staring down at the keys. And beneath the photo, added in white text. You never locked the door. That's when I heard it again. The front door opening. Then closing. Slow. Careful. Footsteps. Not boots. Bare feet on wood. Moving across the floor. And then, silence.